We already know methods. They do work. So look at this line, new employee with 101 and John. Why didn't Java just use a method here? Why invent a whole separate thing called a constructor? By the end of this, that will be obvious. Start without a constructor, just two fields, ID and name. We write new employee, and the JVM allocates memory on the heap, but the object is born empty. ID is 0, name is null. Creating an object and initializing it are two different things. So we initialize it by hand, e1.id equals 101, e1.name equals John. It works, the object fills in. But imagine writing these lines for every object, thousands of times, and never forgetting a field. Painful. The constructor fixes this. We add a special block, named exactly like the class, that takes ID and name and sets them. Now one line, new employee, 101, John, both creates the object and initializes it, and guarantees it starts in a valid state. Here's where everyone gets stuck. The constructor looks just like a method, a name, brackets, a body. So what actually makes it different? Think of it as birth versus work. A constructor handles the object's birth. It runs once to create and initialize. A method does the object's work, actions you call again and again after it exists. Like a factory, the constructor builds the worker. The methods are the worker doing its job. Watch the life cycle. New employee runs. First, memory is allocated on the heap with default values, ID 0, name null, and a constructor frame opens on the stack. Then the arguments 101 and John arrive as parameters, and the constructor copies them into the object's fields with this .id equals ID. Now ID is 101 and name is John. The constructor finishes and its frame pops off the stack. It ran exactly once. The fully initialized object stays on the heap. The constructor existed only during creation. Now the keyword that confuses everyone, this. Inside the constructor, the parameter and the field are both called ID. Plain id means the parameter. This .id means the object's own field. So this .id equals id copies the parameter into the object. This simply means this object. What if you write no constructor at all? The compiler quietly adds one for you, an empty, no argument default constructor. So new employee still works. But here's the trap most beginners hit. The moment you write your own constructor, even a parameterized one, that free default is gone. Now new employee with no arguments will not compile unless you add the no arg constructor back yourself. This is a classic interview question. You can have more than one constructor. That's overloading. Employee with nothing, employee with an ID, employee with ID and name. Java picks the right one by the arguments you pass, like different doors into the same object. Constructors can even call each other, chaining, using this with arguments. The no arg one calls this 101, that calls this with id and unknown. You write the real logic once and reuse it. The one rule, the this call, must be the very first statement. Methods come in a few flavors. A void method does work and returns nothing. A returning method hands back a value. A static method belongs to the class and needs no object. An instance method works on a specific object, like e1.display. Side by side, a constructor creates and initializes. A method performs actions. A constructor has no return type, not even void. A method does. A constructor's name matches the class. A method's is anything. A constructor runs as part of new, once per object. A method is called by name as often as you like. And constructors are not inherited, methods can be. So back to the opening question. Is employee with 101 and John a method? No. A return type would make it a method. In fact, write void in front and it silently becomes one. It's a constructor because its job isn't to do work. It's to make sure a brand new object starts life in a valid state. That's the whole idea. Interview round. What's the core difference between a constructor and a method? A constructor creates and initializes an object. Same name as the class, no return type, runs with new. A method performs actions on an object that already exists. Question 2. You write a parameterized constructor, then call new employee with no arguments. What happens? A compile error. Once you declare any constructor, Java stops generating the free default, so the no arg form no longer exists. Question 3. What does this do in this .id equals ID? This refers to the current object. So this .id is the object's field, while plain ID is the parameter. It removes the name clash. Question 4. What is constructor chaining and the one rule? One constructor calling another with this and arguments to reuse initialization. The rule. The this call must be the first statement. Question 5. The trick. Is void employee a constructor or a method? A method. A constructor has no return type at all. Adding one, even void, turns it into an ordinary method that just happens to share the class name. Now it's your turn. Take the topic test and lock it in. 5 multiple choice plus 5 short answers graded by AI. The link is in the description below. And here's something special. Top the leaderboard on 5 topics in a row, and you'll get a surprise gift from me, plus a personal one-on-one connect. From this video onward, that's a promise.